Welcome, Aries, to your year 2020 horoscope forecast for the Sun or for the Ascendant. If you've yet to subscribe to my channel, I'd be honoured if you did so now. Please click or tap on the bell notification symbol. At the start of each year, we have the solar return, where all the planets are located, and that provides a backdrop for the next 12 months. I'm going to sketch this out for you. I'm also then going to give you the big overview of the major planetary transits and also the eclipses for you this year, and then go on to describe each of the 12 months of this year in detail. So you've got a really authoritative guide of what to expect this year. And as this year begins, we do have a big collection of energy in your sector of success. And I think the most important thing to talk about there is the role of Jupiter, which is very much to do with fortune. Jupiter moved last month, December, into the sign of Capricorn, and it's going to be with you until the 19th of December in 2020. It's also going to be forging an extended alliance with Pluto, the planet of transformation, which can be truly influential. It is true to say that Jupiter is in detriment in the sign of Capricorn, but I think there is enough there for you to feel really excited about its support. Basically, it's saying to you to be cautiously optimistic, and there's nothing wrong with that at all. That's a good balance. But equally, as you begin this year, let's look at things in terms of your personal dimension. And I think that's governed a lot in 2020 by the role of Venus and a midpoint between the Sun and the Moon in the sign of Aquarius. So Venus in Aquarius is very friendly, very democratic, and it's going to suggest that there's going to be quite a lot of social interaction for you this year. But just alongside Venus in Aquarius is the midpoint between the Moon, which is in Pisces, and the Sun in Capricorn. The midpoint is really important because it's the balance of the more masculine and feminine energies that are going to affect your year. And this is going to suggest that it's going to be very important to link up with others right throughout 2020. And if you are looking to improve your love life, then it could come through some kind of group dynamic or a friend. But in a more personal context, Chiron, the comet, which is the wounded healer, is in your sign as this year begins, but conjunct Black Moon Lilith. Now, Black Moon Lilith is actually in retrograde when this occurs, but it suggests that if there is a part of you that you're not tapping into that's to do with desire, this can be a very positive year for you to be much more comfortable about tapping into what that might be. Then you have your spiritual and emotional dimension, and this is governed by the Moon, of course. And the Moon is conjunct Neptune as this year begins. So this is an uber sensitive conjunction, suggesting that listening to your sixth sense is going to be vitally important right through the year. And it's going to guide you to make good decisions and decisions that really work for you, even if at times seems like you're going against a sense of logic. Then you have your sector of desire, the 8th house, and this is governed at the turn of the year by your ruler Mars, which is in Scorpio. It also rules your sign, as I say, but in Scorpio, this is very much to do for you with loot, but also sensuality. So it's going to give you a deeper drive, I feel, to get in touch with any yearning which is not quite yet satisfied. And that brings us then to your sector of goals, worldly interaction and success. And this has a major amount of energy in it as this year begins. And this is, of course, because of the gathering of planets in the sign of Capricorn, a stellium. And two of the most notable things about your solar return is that Mercury and Jupiter, which I've already mentioned, Mercury, the planet of talk and thought, which is really blessed in the sign of Capricorn, it's very businesslike, they're in conjunction as this year begins, but arcing across the heavens to forge a fabulous angle with Uranus, the planet of surprises. This suggests that innovation around goals, ambitions and worldly interaction and being very open-minded are really going to be priming up your chance of improving your lot. But it is true to say that by the 3rd of January, Mars actually moves into the sign of Sagittarius. And the following 6 weeks is going to be a time of real thrust and excitement. If you have been thinking about getting a bit fitter when you've been planning your New Year's resolutions, Mars is going to give you the spark to actually get moving. Could even see you jetting off somewhere to do with your work or on a vacation quite early in this year. But that brings us to the 10th of January, Aries, and this sees a very important event, an annular lunar eclipse, which occurs in the part of your horoscope that's to do with your home, family and emotions. But this peers across the heavens to a collection of energy which is quite awesome. Jupiter has then moved on, as has Mercury, and they're joining up with the Sun, but also Saturn and Pluto, and also an asteroid called Ceres, which is very much to do with nurturing. But Ceres in Capricorn is quite a stern and rather austere influence. People who have this in their natal charts often have parents who are a bit on the cold side, very traditional, and have high expectations of their offspring following their exact instructions. So I do feel in the following 6 months, it is going to be important to make sure that when you are setting those ambitious goals, you are staying mindful of what works for you in terms of your comfort factor, whether it's in terms of the environment you work in or just how emotionally happy you are in a job or target that you're trying to reach towards. Which brings us to the 12th. This is a major event because then Saturn and Pluto really do become exact. Now, for the previous 10 months, they have been loosely combining in Capricorn within about 3 degrees. So I feel that influence has been going on quite a long time. But on the 12th, this exact conjunction does point towards some kind of aim that you've been working towards, reaching a breakthrough, or perhaps you're going to rethink it and go in some kind of different direction. But with Jupiter there giving you that optimism, then if you do feel you need to make a change, do feel comfortable with that. Now on the 14th, there's a magical event because Venus moves into a very, very tender part of your horoscope, into the sign of Pisces, but it's actually very happy in the sign of Pisces. And it's possible that your thoughts from mid-month are going to turn to someone from your past, particularly if you have been feeling nostalgic over the holiday season. But then on the 17th, Mercury replaces Venus in the sign of Aquarius. So this is really just asking you to keep going with the networking, the reaching out to others. It's going to be so important for you this year. And then on the 21st, the Sun moves into Aquarius too, followed by a new moon on the 24th. But this new moon is going to be in a square with Uranus in your sector of everyday resources. It's also true to say that in the latter part of this month, Mars is going to be squaring up with Neptune. So this just says to you that if a more sensitive issue does come to the surface as January comes to a close, it is going to be important to try to keep a sense of perspective. What I would say to you, however, is that in the second half of this year, you have a major event to look forward to, which sees your ruling planet Mars in your sign for a full 6 months. This is truly sensational because whatever it is that you're trying to foment as the turn of the year begins, this change with Mars entering your sign for that last half year is really going to supercharge your energy, drive and determination. Also from the 4th of April to the 7th of August, there's a sensational transit featuring Venus, which is going to be going through a very chatty, flirty and charismatic part of your scope in the sign of Gemini. And this can have wonderful implications for your love life, but also for your ideas, which you can project to others splendidly. Now, I did mention just before that Jupiter and Pluto are going to spend a big part of this year in conjunction. And that is going to help you to make progress, but it probably is going to require some change, adaptation, and flexibility on all our parts. Because Pluto is about reincarnation, there may be parts of your worldly role that are going to just fade away. But if they are replaced by something new, brighter, and that works for you at an emotional level, coming from that eclipse, then that really is what sets the stage for year 2020 for you, Aries. So now I'm going to go through each of the months, starting of course with February. Now, the most wonderful thing about February for you, Aries, is that Venus, the planet of love and attraction, is going to be joining your sign on the 8th, which is going to give you a real opportunity to think about your personal presentation and appearance. So if you decide to hit the sails and give yourself a glamorous makeover, it certainly would be no surprise. But on the 3rd, Mercury does travel into the sign of Pisces, joining up, of course, with Venus initially and also Neptune. Neptune is a very dreamy, ethereal influence which has been having a big impact on you since 2012. It's probably brought out a very compassionate side of your nature at times, and also there probably have been moments when you've needed a lot of peace and tranquility, or you've really been expanding the more spiritual dimension in your situation. But as this month begins, the Sun is initially still in the friendly and democratic sign of Aquarius. And we're still surfing the energy from last month's new moon, but that did clash with Uranus in the part of your scope to do with your everyday resources. So I think for you, this is just saying to you that if you are thinking about any kind of plans that are linked to finance, this is probably not the best of times to be too impulsive around bigger plans, even if you have got the fire burning to really make a breakthrough with all that Capricornian energy that's so manifest at the turn of the year. On the 9th, we do have a full moon in your sister fire sign of Leo. But this also is going to be connecting with Uranus. So I think for you, there could be some choices that you need to make around balancing your social interactions in the following 2 weeks. And we know that your social interactions are going to be hugely important this year because of the midpoint between the Sun and the Moon, and also Venus at the turn of the year in the sign of Aquarius. But I think you're just being required over the following 2 weeks to get a bit of balance. And if there is somebody around you who tends to have a bit of an impact on you, perhaps even financially, in a way which is not good for you, then try to exert a little bit more personal control. One of the things I will tell you, however, with Venus moving into your sign, is that if you're single, expect some new admirers to be beating a path to your door in the weeks ahead. It's really quite a lovely transit for you. It's going to see you radiating out more self-confidence. On the 16th, however, your ruler punches its way into your sector of success, where it's going to be for the following 6 weeks. Yes, Mars climbs into your solar midheaven, the sign of Capricorn, and this really is going to give you a tremendous extra set of determination to really make progress. It also gives you extra self-confidence to raise your profile, reach out to influential people, and basically take on more responsibilities. It really is a can-do change this that you can embrace fully. Now, in the second half of this month, Mars is going to go on to forge a very positive angle to the Sun, but not until the Sun moves into the sign of Pisces, which occurs on the 19th. Now, for you generally, this is a time of the year when you can slow things down a little bit, ready for when the Sun generally re-enters your sign at the time of the vernal equinox, which is usually around the 20th, 21st of March. So if you do find that in some ways you want to keep the world a little bit more at a distance, it wouldn't be a surprise. But there is a bit of a catch, a gotcha, which occurs on the 17th of Feb because Mercury goes into a retrograde. Fortunately, on the 18th, Saturn and Pluto, which have been very close together for, as I said before, by now it's going to be 11 months, they finally come to an end of their conjunction. So I think this is going to be fascinating. Is Mars in its new home in Capricorn and Mercury going retrograde in your sector of reflection going to see you thinking again about one key goal or ambition and changing course a little bit? I think it is possible. Or perhaps you just need to pause and get your bearings around an ongoing strand which you are really committed to, but just not quite sure what your next steps should be. The 23rd does see a new moon, but this does embrace Black Moon Lilith, which is inverted, it's reversed backwards into the part of your horoscope that's to do with the more reflective strand of life. And I think if there is a hidden attraction to someone in your world that you've not been tapping into, you may decide to reach out to them over the following 4 weeks. Now, as the month comes to a close, the advancing Sun and the retreating Mercury come together, and that suggests that you could have some eureka moments, but because they are in such a sheltered, tender zone, I wouldn't be too quick to react to any ideas you get with these. And also in week 3, Venus does square up with Jupiter. So this is just saying to you that if you are wanting to approach someone of influence, you need to be very realistic, because you could almost be too friendly at the wrong time or too ingratiating when you don't mean to be. And of course, Mercury retrograde can send out some mixed signals. So there is a need to balance your desire to be go-getting and drive things outwards, which is coming through Mars connecting with the Sun, and it also connects with Uranus in the second half of this month, with Mercury's retrograde and Black Moon Lilith alongside the new moon in Pisces, just asking you to pause, reflect, and to be really sure about your next moves. So as you come into March, Aries, Mercury continues to invert, to rotate backwards in the retrograde in a very delicate part of your situation. This could be bringing up some feelings of sadness from the past. It may be that you're a little bit unsure about what you want to target in terms of Mars giving you that push to raise your profile. So there could be some self-doubt or anxiety even. But then on the 4th, Mercury rotates back into the sign of Aquarius. So perhaps this uncertainty could be linked to a group association. Someone's not perhaps being in touch as much as you would want, and you're unsure of why that might be. But on the 5th, there's a marvellous development for you. And I really mean this, because Venus moves out of your sign, where it's really been giving you extra sex appeal, but it moves into the sign of Taurus, which it rules. And it immediately goes alongside Uranus. Don't be surprised if you have some sudden good news, especially financially. When Venus goes into the second house at any time, in any sign, wherever it is in its cycle, it tends to spark good financial developments. So I think here, going alongside Uranus, there could be a eureka moment on your part where you have a dazzling idea to improve your lot. Someone could surprise you with their generosity, or perhaps you're going to have a spark of attraction in a more romantic context, because Venus governs not just relationships but also finance. So in the more relating side of it, perhaps there could be a more lustier attraction to someone that takes you completely by surprise. So for about a week from the 5th, there can be a sense of excitement, and that really can be very, very nice to experience. Now, from the 9th of March through till the 4th of December, that big conjunction that I flagged up at the start of the year between Jupiter and Pluto begins. Now, they're both going to go through retrogrades, which could slow down some of your bigger hopes at times. But generally speaking, what you just need to be open to the concept of change. And if you see change as being a positive thing, even if you're someone who is fairly traditional or fairly welded to routines or the things you know well, but this is particularly about how you link with the wider world. So it may mean a change in your outlook around relationships with influential people. It could see you rethinking your thinking around politics, around your work, around property. So if you're open to change, it could end up being fortunate by the 4th of December. But by the 9th, there is a full moon. And this full moon does occur in the sign of Virgo, which for you is about practicalities. And it is squaring up with the Jupiter and Pluto conjunction. So I think basically you're given an opportunity here to think about balancing the more tangible parts of your existence, which is Virgo, against the less obvious areas, the more spiritual and less physical side of your existence, and there may need to be some kind of realignment. Also, from the 5th through to the 11th, the Sun in Pisces does go alongside Neptune. And prepare yourself, because your physical vitality really could drop. And this full moon might be a call out to you to try to make sure that your work-life balance is good, that you're not overdoing anything, that you're eating properly, getting enough sleep, getting the nutrients and the exercise, which is very important. So that may be what's going to come up. On the 10th, however, Mercury does go forward, initially in the sign of Aquarius. And if there has been some kind of disconnect with a friend that you've been surprised by, that can soon be put right. On the 16th, however, Mercury re-enters back into the sign of Pisces, and then by the 29th of this month comes out of shadow. So any confusion that you have been experiencing probably is going to work its way out of your situation by the end of this month. Now, on the 20th, we have one of the most notable moments of the whole year, because the Sun moves into your sign. We have the vernal equinox, and this is the start of the whole astrological journey. And wherever you live in the world, this is known as the spring equinox, even if you are in the southern hemisphere. And this is a time of new beginnings. Western astrology is not based on fixed constellations. It's based on the seasons. And so it's a chance to reinvigorate your situation. I think your physical vitality, which only the week before may have seemed rock bottom, can really start to come back in a much more positive way, which can please you hugely. Also, there is going to be a conjunction between Jupiter and Saturn this month. Now, Saturn, of course, can be about restriction, Jupiter about growth. So possibly you're going to be changing something around your work, but something that can actually endure for the longer term. Not all change needs to be things completely going out of our lives. Sometimes it can be modifications of what we have at the present time. But the Sun and then the new moon, which is going to occur in your sign on the 24th, are a marker to suggest that there is new growth coming through, green shoots of recovery. But Saturn does move on the 22nd into the sign of Aquarius, where it's going to be through to the end of June. Now, this is a taster, because by the 17th of December, Saturn will move into Aquarius for a further 2 years. But for now, this is your chance to think seriously about those friendships, but also about your hopes and wishes in a less practical way, the things that really give us a sense of happiness, and also our ideals. You can start to rethink some of these with Saturn's support in this area. But on the 31st, this is when we have Mars joining up with Aquarius too, and then linking with Saturn. So as you come into the start of April, there could be a sense that you are really identifying newer long-term plans. They may not necessarily give you an instant return, but for the first week of April, you're certainly given an opportunity to think about how you can shape things going forwards, because with Saturn and Mars together, there could be a sense of frustration, and the way to make this conjunction work is to narrow our focus very much. So it could be that you start to rethink some of your friendships. So because that Venus conjunction with the midpoint at the start of the year gives you the option to grow your friendship zone. It doesn't mean to say that all the friends that are in your world at the start of this year will be the same ones at the end of the year. It's a chance to improve things, to get the people around you who understand who you are now. So this conjunction between Mars and Saturn, although not necessarily without some bumps, because Saturn is about limitation and Mars is about drive and energy, is certainly a very valuable one as you shape your prospects into April. Now, April also sees from the 5th to the 10th, not just that initial conjunction between Mars and Saturn, it sees a beautiful angle between Mercury and Jupiter and Pluto. Now, Mercury is still in the sign of Pisces at this stage. It's actually going to be moving into your sign on the 11th, which is a wonderful opportunity to really kick on. But I think this combination suggests that you can really have some great connections to influential people, or you can do some deep research, or you can untap within yourself your resources and your thinking to make those connections in ways that can be very good for your outer activities. But Venus moves on the 4th, as I flagged earlier, and for 4 months is going to be making its way through the sign of Gemini. This is brilliant. If you're wanting to meet somebody new romantically, this is going to give you much greater confidence to mix and mingle. It could make you flirtier. It can also make you popular, but it's pushing you to interact just at a time of the year when Mercury is a bit muted, but it's all coming good for you, because on the 11th, Mercury, as I said, moves into your sign and combines with Chiron, that comet, which is the wounded healer. So this is saying to you, if there have been some concerns about your sense of self, your sense of attractiveness, your individual ideas, this is a chance to rethink things. But there is a full moon on the 8th in the sign of Libra, which suggests this is going to be a key moment in your year for those relationships. So you're being basically encouraged to stick with the plan, stick with the program, as they say, in terms of what's important to you, but just stay sensitive to how other people feel, especially people close to you. But in an extreme situation, this full moon, because it does clash with Pluto and Jupiter, does suggest that if there is a power dynamic in an existing relationship which isn't working very well, you will have to look at it over the following 2 weeks. But I think Mercury is going to be such a help to you, because it's going to bring you into the present. So you have the Sun with you, you have obviously Chiron, and you have Mercury, and they're all really pointed towards you embracing what makes you unique. And that's you. That's essentially who you are. And also week 3 of this month sees Mercury in your sign forge a stunning angle to both Mars and Saturn. So this gives you an opportunity to get things moving, initiate new plans, but link them in a way to others which will be sustainable for the future. So that's fabulous. But then on the 20th, the Sun moves into the sign of Taurus, moves out of your sign, and all the hard work that you've been putting in over the previous 4 weeks can start to be rewarded, because you can see tangible benefits. Perhaps you'll feel better about yourself, your self-worth, the second house, or finances can improve. But just like Venus did, this is going to go alongside Uranus. And essentially all this year, the more open-minded you are about marshalling your resources, the better it is, Aries. And also the new moon, which occurs on the 23rd, is also going to be linking up with Uranus. So it's a time to be really imaginative, innovative, think about new ways to improve your income, to feel better about yourself. And if, for example, you're someone who wants to get more enterprising, be more entrepreneurial, this is a great time for you to make your mark. On the 25th, however, Pluto does go into a retrograde. This happens every year. And it does suggest that if you have got some big goals and aims, that the need to understand your deeper motivations for them, so the more inward journey of how Pluto works, is going to be just as important as what you're doing at a more external level. But the 28th sees Mercury move out of your sign and into Taurus too. Again, there can be the opportunity to improve your lot financially, or a surprise improvement occurs to your resources or financial circumstances, which can absolutely delight you. Now, it is true there could also be a surprise expense, but Uranus generally, I feel, can work very well for you this year if you embrace what it means, which means about trying different things, not necessarily taking just the well-trodden path. It's about creating your own destiny. So as you come into May, Aries, there is a big emphasis on your sector of resources, with the Sun, Mercury, and also Uranus all in this sector. But then on the 5th, we do see a big change. The North Node, also known as the point of destiny, which is almost like the emotional gravity of the heavens, inverts back into the sign of Gemini. For this year so far, it's been in Cancer, and for much of last year. Now, obviously in Cancer, it was very much at home. And for you, that was very much about exactly that, your environment, your emotional reactions. But moving into the sign of Gemini, where it joins up with Venus, really does put the emphasis on how you interact with others, how you use your mind, your conversations. And it really is a very helpful change for you. It's asking you to match your emotions with your mentality, but that's something that is a real opportunity for you for the rest of this year. And of course, Jupiter continues to combine with Pluto, even though Pluto is in retrograde, high in the sky, and that's seeing changes in your worldly interactions too. But the 7th does see one of the most passionate full moons of the year, Scorpio. Now for you, normally this would be about managing your immediate finances against your longer term expenditure. So for example, if you do decide to splash out now, in the here and now, if you like, what's the impact going to be further down the track, especially if it was a big ticket item? But there is a little bit of a change on this particular one, because the Sun is alongside Mercury this time. So it suggests that if you use your mind in a very agile way, this full moon could actually be very good for managing your resources much more effectively. Now on the 11th, Saturn does go into a retrograde in the sign of Aquarius. And this is going to go on, the retrograde itself, through to the 29th of September. And of course, when any retrograde occurs, but particularly to the big higher octave outer planets, that can see generally things just slowing down. And in fact, although Mercury moves on the 12th also into Gemini, which is going to see a speeding up in your everyday world, which will be augmented by the Sun's move of the 21st and the new moon of the 22nd, which are joining up with Venus and the North Node. So you're moving into a more sociable phase of the year. I do feel that those bigger goals and ambitions can just seem to be a little bit more out of reach. And part of the reason for that is that Mars, your ruler, moves on the 13th into a more subdued location. Its transit through the watery Pisces, but also on the 14th, Jupiter goes into a 4-month retrograde. And of course, we already know Jupiter is not at its absolute best in Capricorn. So generally speaking, I think you're given an opportunity at this phase of the year to have a bit more fun. And it may be that some of those bigger goals and ambitions don't go quite as quickly as you would like, but try to be philosophical about it. Venus also goes retrograde on the 13th. And I think this is just saying to you, this and Jupiter's retrograde, that it's important to be realistic in life. Sometimes people comment that I mention things a little bit more realistically than some astrologers who are very optimistic. But I just try to be very honest about whatever's going on. So if it's good stuff, I'll definitely present that. And I definitely want you to be cheerful, upbeat, bright and positive. Well, that's part of you anyway. I'm just giving you the cautionary notes to plan things. So with Venus going into retrograde, it's saying don't take any romantic situation for granted. Be very sincere in your interactions. That is important too. But the Sun's move is really great. It's going to see a speeding up, and especially on the back of that new moon, which actually is forging a very positive angle to Saturn, even though Saturn is going or has gone into that retrograde. But on the 29th of the month of May, we do see Mercury move out of Gemini and go into the sign of Cancer. And that is not its best transit because it's watery, and obviously Mercury is very much to do with logic and it's about communication. But for you, it's just asking you to think more about the foundations of your existence. And if you've ever thought of working from home, as this month draws to a close, it might become quite an exciting possibility for you. As you come into June, it's really exciting time. We have 2 eclipses this month, Aries, but we also have a conjunction between the Sun and Venus in the first 5 days, which is absolutely delicious. If you find yourself flirting with someone across those days, it may be meant to be something much more significant. It's possible that it could be something that's fleeting and transitory, or it could be that you are going to have that meeting of minds, but attraction that really can make your pulse race quickly. But I do think it won't be dull, that's for sure. But also from the 1st through to the 18th of this month, the Sun in Gemini is going to be squaring up with Mars in the sign of Pisces. And as I've already said, Mars in Pisces is not at its best. You may find yourself having a few thoughts that are linked more to the past, which is Mars in the 12th house. And if there are any outstanding issues which haven't been cleared, particularly to do with a sibling, a neighbour, or perhaps your views on situations, there could be some nervous tension this month, and it may be time for you to actually try to ventilate and articulate what you really feel and get it off your chest. It would be very helpful for you. Also on the 5th, we have an annular lunar eclipse, which occurs in your sister fire sign of Sagittarius. Now, this really is all about the desire to have greater ideas, to expand your world, which comes from the 9th house of Sagittarius, but it is squaring up with Mars. So I think a clash over a point of principle would be possible this month, but also something could come out into the open that has been hidden or kept a little bit under wraps. And from the 9th through to the 17th, we also have a conjunction between Mars and Neptune. So if you find yourself feeling drained once more, a little bit lacking in vitality, and not really having quite the energy to engage in those social opportunities which the Sun, the North Node, and also Venus are asking you to embrace, this is why. Perhaps you need to give yourself permission to have some time out across those days, and that would be a very healing thing to do. Great time to have a massage, some Reiki, some shiatsu. Any kind of therapeutic treatment like that would be very positive at this phase of the year. Then on the 18th, Mercury goes into retrograde in Cancer, adding to the complication that this planet of logic, of communication in the watery sign of Cancer now starts to retrace its steps. Is there some cross wires likely to develop around a family matter? Work hard at trying to overcome this. All we can do with Mercury retrograde is to try to stay as alert as possible and manage the things that we can control as astutely as possible. Now, from the 21st, the Sun moves into Cancer, which for you, again, like the Mercury being here, is very much about your environment. But the Sun could be supportive of Mercury's retrograde, but on the same day there is a solar eclipse. This is an annular solar eclipse, It's going to last right through to the end of this year, and it is asking you to stay mindful, not just of your home environment, but how this works in terms of your longer term hopes, because it is in a quincunx with Saturn, which is a more straining influence. So although you can think about moving home, beautifying where you live, decorating, adding to your family, trying to improve contact with someone that you're very affectionate and fond of, just be aware that it needs to work in terms of your core hopes and expectations, your idealism, and also your future hopes. So if you are wanting to see developments at the base of your existence, whoever you're connecting with needs to share the same emotional values. This is critical for you in the last half of the year. 25th, however, sees Venus end that retrograde, which you can celebrate. And then on the 28th, we have the most exciting day of the whole year. Yes, this is when Mars pitches up in your sign, and it's going to be with you till the 6th of January 2021. It's also going to be forging a phenomenal solar eclipse in December, which I'll tell you about later. But for now, I think this is just going to give you more thrust. You're going to move into the present. The kind of rather waning energy that you got with Mars's conjunction with Neptune from the 9th to the 17th is going to ease away, and you're going to feel quite feisty as this month comes to a close, but within more of an emotional context because of the Sun's transit through the sign of Cancer. Now, July is going to see some quite testing influences. I just have to be frank about it. But one of them sees Jupiter, the planet of growth, of happiness and expansion and good fortune, in an opposition from the 11th through to the 16th with the Sun in Cancer. But I actually think this can be really positive for you. But if you are thinking of trying to snaffle yourself that new home or expand where you live now, perhaps through an extension or new bathroom or kitchen, just cost it out carefully, because this particular aspect could make your eyes bigger than your belly, if that makes sense, in terms of your material expectations. It's just something to be mindful of. On the 1st also, Saturn moves back into the sign of Capricorn. But the good news is this is its last pass, and by the 16th of December, it won't come back to Capricorn for another roughly 28 years. So it's a big moment. And if you have been finding some big goal that was important to you at the turn of the year and as the years develop has slowed down, this really is asking you to roll up your sleeves and fight and be as disciplined and hardworking as possible, which you can definitely do. Now, on the 5th, there is also an annular lunar eclipse in the sign of Capricorn. So it's saying to you, just balancing what you need emotionally with how you interact with the world at large is going to be a big theme for this month. Because from the 13th to the 18th, the Sun's in an opposition with Pluto. You could encounter someone across those group of days who's a bit of a kind of do as I say, not what I do type of character. It could be someone in the family, it could be a boss, and it may not take into account how you feel about something. Or are you about to be a little bit too strident? This is something to be mindful of. The good news is that by the 12th, Mercury ends its retrograde in Cancer, so that's going to help your mind feel a bit sharper and less befuddled, which is possible in the 4th house. And anything that's been rotating around your mind can come more into the present. However, the 20th new moon in Cancer is probably one of the toughest of this whole year because it is in strict opposition to Saturn. So if you have got an issue with someone close to you being austere, cool, judgmental, critical, it could come out over the next 2 or 3 weeks. Just be aware of this. I'm not painting the downside. I'm preparing you to deal with anyone who could be a bit tricky. However, beautifully, on the 22nd, the Sun does move into your sister fire sign of Leo. And of course, this is the sign that it rules. And this is wonderful for you. It's going to give you a gush of affection, more vitality. You're going to feel more attractive. And you're going to move out of this really quite tough period of oppositions between the Sun and the big three of Saturn, Pluto, and Jupiter. And on the 26th of this month of July, also Mercury comes out of shadow, so it gets back to the point where the retrograde first began. And I think therefore you're going to end this month feeling a lot happier, more progressive and more on the front foot. Now, an interesting thing happens in August when on the 3rd there is a full moon in Aquarius. And this is almost like the mirror image of the full moon which occurred on the 9th of February, but in reverse. And ironically, they then tuned into Uranus, squared up with Uranus, and they do again. So the resources side of your situation this year, which can be fluid, asks you to be open-minded, is once again primed up, again around your social situation. And the question you need to ask yourself, are you spending money a little bit too freely? Are there people in your world who have a sudden but upsetting or unsettling impact on you because they have very different values or different attitude to finances? This is not a time to take risks around your resources, but despite saying that, Mercury does move into Leo on the 5th, which for you is an entirely positive thing. But for the first 10 days of this month, well, Jupiter and Mars are in a right angle. Mars in your sign is making you much more single-minded in the second half of this year. And it's just saying to you that if you do promise something in a professional context, you need to be able to walk the talk and back it up with action. But much more challenging is from the 5th to the 22nd of this month, your ruler is in conflict with Pluto. Now, this is an aspect that is not to be underestimated, and it's quite a warlike aspect, and it points towards you getting very frustrated and exasperated if someone isn't hearing where you're coming from, isn't recognizing your rights, isn't seeing that you have a right to be individual, creative, innovative. So it's about power. So either you need to rein in some of your approach or need to reinforce your boundaries against those who are not respecting you. It just depends on your unique situation. On the 8th, Venus moves into Cancer. This is lovely, actually. It could see you doing some home decoration, holding some kind of gathering, perhaps for the family, having a barbecue if you're in the Northern Hemisphere. This is beautiful. And then the 11th to the 21st sees a fantastic angle between the Sun and Mars take shape. So the Mars angle to Jupiter and Pluto is more challenging this month, but this one with the Sun is really uplifting. And this can, if you've got a clear sight of what you want to achieve and you're with the right people, see you really motivated and in fact can get something off the ground or put more energy into something that's important to you like never before. Also, on the 15th, Uranus does go into a retrograde in your second house about resources, but it's just asking you to think about how you earn money and does it give you the sense that how you do it still sees you as a free spirit. So for example, if you work for yourself, the answer is probably yes. Whether you earn enough is another matter. So it may be you're thinking about your relationship to it in that regard. Or if you have a very good job and you're well paid, but it's stupefying, doesn't stimulate you, Uranus is asking you to think about how you can create excitement but still maintain your financial basis. And that may mean that you need to change something. So that's why the retrograde works at a more internal level. However, the 19th sees the best new moon of the whole year for you when the Sun forges that link with Mars still. So for the following month, from the 19th through to about the 18th of September, you can really have so much sex appeal. And if you did want to meet someone new, this is the time to have the confidence to go for it. Also on the 20th, Mercury moves into its home zone of Virgo. This is a bit precise, it's a bit perfunctory, it's about making sure the details are right. It's not very sexy, but it is very functional. So it's asking you to get down to the nitty gritty. The 23rd, the Sun also moves into the sign of the Virgin, which is very much about purity. It's making sure that your world is working in balance, that everything, whether it's home, work, diet, fitness, your relationships with aunts and uncles, and even with pets, are all working quite as you wish. Now, the last 2 weeks of this month do see Mars and Saturn in conflict, which suggests Keep being patient even where Mars is supporting you with the Sun. Not everything will quite go as quickly as you would like, and if you can embrace that patience, the more chance you have of making progress. The last 4 days of this month sees Pluto in opposition with Venus. If someone offers you a big career breakthrough, just work out what their motives are. They could really flatter you to the heavens, but what's really behind that? The last week, however, sees a wonderful link between Mercury, Jupiter and Pluto, which can be very good for your career. If you get the details right, someone influential can recognise those qualities that you're adding thrust, creativity, but hard work in application, and be very impressed by you. September begins pretty well with a full moon on the 2nd. So although we have the Sun and Mercury in the sign of Virgo, on the other side of the heavens, the full moon and Neptune in the sign of Pisces. So that's asking you really to stay focused on the practical strands that Virgo is asking you to be very precise about, but not ignore the less tangible parts of life. So that's an influence to be mindful of in the following 2 weeks, but it does forge a very positive angle to Uranus. So there's Uranus threaded into events yet again. So again, stay very open-minded about how you approach things around your own self-worth and also around your resources. Now on the 6th is a brilliant event. Venus moves into Leo, which for you is going to give you a dazzling star quality over the following 28 days. But on the same day, Mercury moves into your opposite sign. And this combination are going to be broadly relating well to one another for the rest of the month. So it's a great opportunity for you to really shine when it comes to social interactions, meeting anyone new on a date, getting together with friends, pursuing hobbies, expressing the talents you've got, but through the practical prism of Virgo. However, it is true to say that on the 9th, your ruler Mars does go into a retrograde, and it's going to, this is why we've had this extended period of transit through your sign. And it's just saying to you that if you have been really thrusting your energies into different parts of your situation, it might be time just to throttle back a little bit, rethink some of your objectives. If you have been a bit impulsive, especially as Mars has clashed with Mars, Saturn and Pluto, it's asking you just to stay within your own energies. I think that will be very good for you. Ironically, Jupiter, the planet of growth, ends its 4-month retrograde on the 13th and goes forwards in your sector of success. So that's something that's really worth savouring. On the 16th, the new moon in Virgo is a call to action to keep going with all the virtuous things that you've been trying and get your life working more smoothly, more organisedly, get the type of work that gives you a sense of satisfaction, get the right balance between where you help people but you need to look after your own energy and therefore fortifying your boundaries. Now Mercury then goes into a bit of a challenge in a right angle with Pluto from the 19th to the 26th, and because Mercury is in your sector of relating, it could point towards some kind of tension between you and someone in a position of authority, or perhaps in someone junior to you, depending on where you are in your life journey. And that can only be unpicked by not taking fixed positions, resisting dogma, and just trying to keep the lines of communication open. And the Sun gives you an awesome opportunity to do precisely this when on the 23rd it moves into your opposite sign of Libra. So for you, it all becomes about relationships. And this is a critical phase of the whole year for you. Also, Mercury then moves into Scorpio on the 27th, but don't see this as a bad thing. This is an opportunity to actually understand not what people are saying to you, but what they really mean. Again, about motives, but also to do any research you need to do, to don your detective's mac and really try to get under the surface of life in general. It could see you much more intrigued by metaphysical subjects like astrology or anything to do with ends and beginnings. It can also see you grappling with longer term financial strands. But then Saturn ends its retrograde in Capricorn. And you're not going to have to go through this again, as I said before, for broadly 28 years. So that's something to really be celebrating. It's now going to be speeding up before it moves into your sector of friendship, long-term hopes on the 17th of December. Now, October has two full moons, one on the first day, one on the last day of the 31st. The first one is, in actual fact, in your own sign, because it's going to be facing up to the sun in Libra. And this full moon, so we get a blue moon this month, and this full moon for you is really about whether you feel a relationship has gone as far as it possibly can. And this is going to be underlined by the fact that Mars and Pluto are clashing for the first 3 weeks of this month. So if someone really hasn't been showing you the respect that you want, hasn't been tuning into all the effort and energy that you've been investing this year, this could be a point over the following 2 weeks where you really do decide whether it is make or break. But of course, make or breaks can still be make, and it is dependent in part by the energies you get from the other person, which you have no control over. But on the 3rd, Venus, the planet of relating, does move out of that delightfully flirtatious, glamorous transit through Leo, which has really given you the potential to woo new admirers or just have a wonderful time socially, into the much more practical and giving sign of Virgo. This isn't as sexy, but it is about perhaps being thoughtful in relationships, doing those practical gestures that actually can make life go round and love go round just as much as more glamorous or bigger gestures can sometimes do momentarily, but don't always cut the mustard longer term. Now, from the 8th to the 21st, we then have a kind of a repeat of what happened in July with the sun going through Cancer, but this time it's through Libra, where each of the big three of Jupiter, Saturn and Pluto are being squared up by the sun. This is because this is a cardinal position, it's angular, so your sign is the first of the angular signs. The second, of course, is Cancer, the third is Libra, and the fourth is Capricorn, also known as cardinal. So it's possible that some kind of shift needs to go on in a relationship. So you get what you need if you feel that you're relating, but the other person gets what they need from you. If the balance is a bit out of kilter, it's going to come into focus this month. And from the 14th, Mercury does go into retrograde in Scorpio. If you're owed money or if you're involved in a conveyancing on a property, dig in. This could be a slowing down that you won't necessarily welcome, but all we can do, as ever, is be as persistent as possible, be as accurate in what we do to make sure the processes we're controlling are as effective as possible. The 16th new moon would ordinarily be wonderful for you in the sign of Libra. It's all about new beginnings or new energy in relationships, but this one's clashing with both Saturn and Pluto. So relationships at this point in the year are going to be about getting the balance right between what you need as an individual and what the other person needs from you, but how also you both exist in the wider world. So, for example, if one of you has a very heavy, demanding job, or the other has big demands with children, there needs to be good communication to support each other, yet at the same time make it work. So that's the critical thing this month. Ironically, Venus in Virgo actually forges a beautiful link with Pluto from the 18th through to the 24th. And if you do have a connection to someone, be it professionally, and I mean not necessarily romantically, that's deep and works well, or you just have a real appreciation of your partner, you're going to feel it at a very intense level during that time. The sun then moves into your sector of transformation. Its transit through Scorpio on the 23rd, joining up with the Mercury retrograde. And there is also Mercury inversing back into Libra on the 28th before Venus moves into your opposite sign of Libra, where actually it's beautifully positioned for you. Is someone going to surprise you by an about turn in their attitude as this month draws to a close? Wouldn't surprise me. Someone could be a little bit difficult, a bit stroppy, a bit outspoken, and then end up eating their words as this month draws to a close? Or is it you who's going to try a more diplomatic approach as October comes to an end? But the full moon that occurs on the last day is in your sector of everyday resources. And so it is going to be important that you are managing things well, keeping things in balance in that regard. And also in the last 4 days of this month, Saturn is in a right angle with Mercury. So when it comes to those more commercial things, we get a repeat of the influence which occurred at the end of August. So there could be a little bit of tension, a bit of inhibition about how you're speaking, particularly to someone older or who's perhaps more traditional, more stuck in their ways. So as you come into November, the penultimate month of the year, we have the Sun in the deep and passionate Scorpio, but we have Mercury now having rotated back into Libra, and we have Venus in its home zone, its other home zone other than Taurus, in the sign of Libra. And Venus here is very charming, and it does give you an opportunity to try to put things right if there have been cross wires in a relationship. And on the 3rd, Mercury also goes forwards in Libra, but on the 11th returns back into Scorpio. So if you have been waiting for that financial clarification, then I think keeping the lines of communication open and trying to be as interactive as possible rather than laying conditions down will be much better for you. On the 14th, however, this is something to really feel very, very happy about, because Mars ends that retrograde in your sign, and this is going to really rev you up and give you the desire to make fundamental changes, get on the front foot, feel more energized, get fitter, be more directed in your approach, move into the present more, get more action orientated. It's all good with Mars going forwards in your sign. On the 15th, there is actually a beautiful new moon in Scorpio, which links sensationally well with Neptune. If we go right back to the start of this year's story, remember I told you the moon was conjunct Neptune, and it was vital that you listened to your sixth sense all through this year. Well, this new moon really reinforces this. So from the 15th of this month through to the middle of December, follow your hunches. They won't fail you. How many times have we all gone into something and then said to ourselves after the event, do you know, where we become hindsight psychics, do you know, I knew this actually wasn't good for me, but some other issue compelled me to go with it. Well, try not to be compelled this year. Listen to what your inner voice tells you. On the 19th, also Mercury comes out of shadow, which is great news. The 22nd, however, is fantastic for you, because on that day, the Sun moves into the sign of Sagittarius, the Archer, the 9th zodiac sign, the 9th house. And for you, it's all about expansion, travel, being more free-spirited. It's all about being more open. It's about higher culture, philosophy. It's brilliant. It's great for the run-up to Christmas. You can be much more interactive with others and feel a sense of liberation, particularly with Mars travelling forwards. Now, Venus also moves on the same day into the deep and sultry Scorpio. So your sex life in the run-up to Christmas can get hot, hot, hot. And that's something to really look forward to. And on the 29th, even Neptune, which has been dragging backwards in a retrograde, ends that. And some of the insecurities or the swirling mist of uncertainty and confusion, which it can create in the 12th house, is going to dampen down somewhat. The 30th does see an annular lunar eclipse, this time in Gemini, where you've had Venus for 4 months this year, where you still have the North Node, which is very much about connecting your thinking to your emotions. So I think this one, in a way, has a similar kind of message for you. It is about communication. Things are moving quick. You could be really wanting to go off and do things, moving around a lot, being very, very physical, but stay connected to your emotions. Which brings us into December, Aries. What a spectacular year it's been. On the 2nd, it gets even better for you. Mercury moves into Sagittarius. Now, if you're really into your astrology, you'll know that Mercury in Sagittarius is in detriment. But I think it's one of the softer detriments. This is because it's in the opposite location from Gemini, which Mercury rules, and squaring up from Virgo, which it also governs too. But I think this gives you oodles of push to be much more daring, to travel more, to learn new skills, be open to things like new languages and cultures. It's the perfect time for you to head off and get some winter sun if you're in the northern hemisphere, or if you're in the southern hemisphere, to really enjoy your vacation. But on the 14th, we get one of the most spectacular moments of the whole year, a total solar eclipse this time in Sagittarius, but it's linking brilliantly to Mars in your sign. If there have been things that you felt have oppressed you at any time in recent years, particularly that transit of Saturn through Capricorn, I think this is going to be your bounce back moment, bar none, because not only is it going to really give you huge energy in the last 2 weeks of this year, but also in the first 5.5 months of next year. So it's going to give you the opportunity to showcase what you're well known for, which is your buccaneering, trailblazing energies of getting things done, of initiating things, of being very decisive on the front foot. And that's when you're absolutely at your best. And I think this is a fantastic way to end the year. Also, on the 16th, Venus moves into Sagittarius too. So there could be links to others before the end of this year, and that can make your pulse race. And then on the 17th, as I flagged before, Saturn moves into Aquarius, where it's going to be for 2 years. It's had that brief sojourn earlier this year, but it's joined, and this is crucial, on the 20th by Jupiter. Jupiter was a little bit quieter and more dimmed in the sign of Capricorn, where it's in detriment, or in full, sorry. But Jupiter in Aquarius is very much about the new world order that is developing, where we all have to come together to think about resources, the environment, the planet, being a bit more democratic, finding ways to collaborate and cooperate. And this is going to be a very exciting epoch for personkind, let alone you personally. But this year doesn't end without the opportunity to still smash through around those big goals and ambitions that you had right at the start of this year, with that sensational solar return, as both the Sun and Mercury move into Capricorn on the 21st. Because they're together, some kind of magical event can happen for you around your career or a big hope. There is a full moon in Cancer as this year comes to a close, suggesting your feelings can be very close to the surface as you end 2020. But I think you're going to look back on this year seeing that Mars in its transit through your sign for 6 months, Venus going through Gemini for 4 months, the North Node going back into Gemini, and also that conjunction between Jupiter and Pluto have all been awesome opportunities for you to shine. But 2021 can be even more exciting yet. If you'd like to know what 2020 would hold for you as an individual based on your time, date and place of birth, you can get 30% off your forecast. You can get the rest of 2019 free if you're ordering in that year. If you're ordering in 2020, you'll get 12 months from the date of the order. Please see the link beneath this video. It's been a real pleasure being with you. Good luck, Aries, and goodbye.